Get some! Welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk, Uygur, and Kasparian with you guys. Giant news, giant breaking news. Actually, there's several of them, but the first one is the biggest one of all. Casper.
Got a lot of big ones, we got a lot of little ones.
Isn't it?
All right, so we begin with something that just broke, huge story. I mean, look, I gotta be honest with you, people associated with Trump seem to be doing more flips than an Olympic gymnast, okay? Because we've got Mark Meadows, we've got Jenna Ellis. Let's start with Mark Meadows, that's the latest news. So, Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, has officially flipped in the election interference case that is being brought forth by special counsel Jack Smith. Now, we have some word in regard to the various times Mark Meadows spoke to special counsel Jack Smith and provided him cooperating information about Donald Trump and his role in attempting to overturn the election. Now, I want to be clear that we don't know the entirety of what Mark Meadows has told Jack Smith, but here's what we know as reported by ABC News. Mark Meadows has spoken with special counsel Jack Smith's team at least 3 times this year, including once before a federal grand jury, which came only after Smith granted Meadows immunity to testify under oath, according to sources familiar with the matter. The sources said Meadows informed Smith's team that he repeatedly told Trump in the weeks after the 2020 presidential election that the allegations of significant voting fraud coming to them were baseless. Now, clearly Mark Meadows carried himself very differently, publicly speaking, and his book contradicts what he has been telling Jack Smith, according to this reporting. But he even told Jack Smith that he felt that Trump was a dishonest actor, a liar, if you will. Meadows also told the federal investigators Trump was being dishonest with the public when he first claimed to have won the election only hours after polls closed on November 3rd, 2020, before final results were even in. Obviously, we didn't win, a source quoted Meadows as telling Smith's team in hindsight. Now, keep in mind, Meadows is not someone who has had any bad blood with Trump yet. I'm very curious to see what Trump thinks about Meadows after he reads this reporting. Up until now, he has only said complimentary things about Mark Meadows. He has referred to him as a great chief of staff, a special friend, if you will. I mean, he's certainly a special when it comes to this case.
Helping the special prosecutor.
Yeah, well, yeah. So look, there's more that we have learned about what Meadows has told Jack Smith, including the contradictions between what he's told Smith and what he wrote in his book. But before we get to that, Cenk, thoughts?
So first thought is, ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
No,
down goes Meadows. No, not Trump. Okay. Meadows.
All right.
Okay.
I thought you were having a mission accomplished moment.
No. We know. Okay, so down goes Meadows for now, and down goes as in he got an immunity deal, so he's going to be all right, presumably. But the most important thing is, in order to get this deal, he had to give the goods. And so apparently already testified in front of a grand jury. So this thing is locked in. You can't untestify. That stuff will be used against you later if you squelch on the deal. Then you're going to prison for sure, because you're on the record as both with Jack Smith in person and otherwise. So it looks like this thing is locked in stone. I hope that's what it looks like. It just broke. And then so Trump will turn on him viciously. He'll go from great guy, special friend to he was a loser. I always knew it. Okay, guys, this is his chief of staff. He knows exactly what they lied about in regards to the 2020 election, and exactly what. Look, the big thing that we're all looking for here is the fake elector scheme. How much information does he have on that? Now Cheeseborough's flipped and he wrote the fake elector documents. Sidney Powell's flipped, Jenna Ellis is flipped. We're gonna get to that next. And now down goes Meadows for the first time in a long time, including Trump is in criminal trouble. In New York on the fraud case, he's in civil and financial trouble, and that's very real, and that's why he's so worried about the New York case. But this is the first time in a criminal case where I think, wow, are they actually gonna get him?
So a few things I think is worth mentioning. So Mark Meadows has not been indicted in any of these cases, whether we're talking about the Georgia election interference case or special counsel Jack Smith's federal criminal case in regard to election interference. So it is interesting to me that Mark Meadows wanted to ensure immunity before providing any testimony to Jack Smith or to his prosecutorial team. The only thing that we know of Mark Meadows engaging in was he was the individual who set up the phone call between Trump and the Georgia Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. He also, of course, repeated some of the lies, the baseless notion that there was widespread voter fraud. Now, what he says isn't the problem, right? That's actually protected speech. The question is, did Mark Meadows engage in any activity that could be criminal in regard to this case? Because look, he wanted immunity. Why would you want immunity unless you did something wrong?
Yeah, and so that is Mark Meadows and Jenna Ellis and Sidney Powell and all of those people saying, yeah, we were in a criminal conspiracy together. You don't get an immunity deal because you lied to your parents and it was slightly immoral. No, this is for legal matters, criminal legal matters. You have to admit we did this crime together, and here's my evidence on the rest of my co-conspirators on the crime we committed.
Right.
So understand the weight of this thing. And the crime they committed was a crime against the United States of America.
And its voters, the will of the American people and our electoral process, who we, the majority of us, wanted to be the president of the United States. Mark Meadows, along with all of these other individuals within Donald Trump's team and Trump himself, wanted to overturn the results of our democratic process and go against the will of the American people. And I am curious, now that so many people in Trump's orbit have flipped, I mean, is Vivek Ramaswamy gonna continue arguing that Trump did nothing wrong? That his behavior was protected by the First Amendment?
So Anna, it's funny you say that because on social media I put out just a couple of hours ago, not knowing anything about Mark Meadows at that moment, we've got to get every single Republican on the record about 2020.
Yes.
And the questions have to be relentless. And the press should not ask them anything until they answer the question, was the election stolen in 2020 or was it not? Because look, it's a public service announcement in a sense, because the Republican voters want to know too. And when I put that on social media, a lot of them agreed. They're like, damn right, we need to know who's on our side and realizes that the FBI and the deep state stole this election. I don't want to vote for a guy who's with the deep state. Okay, good. So the Republican voters want to know. The rest of us want to know, okay? So every Republican politician in the country should absolutely positively be forced to say, was the election stolen or wasn't it? And no, none of this greasy, well, I think this is irregularities. No, stolen or not, who won the goddamn election?
Right.
It's a very simple question, okay?
The thing that's so depressing to me is how many people in the country, how many people surrounding Donald Trump and Trump himself are willing to essentially lie to the American people, even engage in this grift to sell books in the case of Mark Meadows, repeating the lie that the election was stolen. So let's actually get to Mark's book, okay? Chief's Chief is the name of it, very clever. He's referring to himself as the chief of staff. And what he says in his book is very different from the testimony that he allegedly provided to special counsel Jack Smith's team. According to Meadows' book, the election was stolen and rigged with the help from allies in the liberal media who ignored actual evidence of fraud right there in plain sight for anyone to access and analyze.
Oops.
So of course he's willing to say this kind of garbage in order to sell his books. Because the grift, the money is more important than being honest with the American people, and more importantly, being honest with the American people about our electoral process and the outcome of a presidential election. Now, sources told ABC News that when speaking with Jack Smith's investigators, Meadows conceded that he doesn't actually believe some of the statements in his own book. Meadows privately told Smith's investigators that to this day, he has yet to see any evidence of fraud that would have kept now President Joe Biden from the White House. And he told them he agrees with a government assessment at the time that the 2020 presidential election was the most secure election in US history. Meadows also told investigators earlier this year that he has long believed that Trump was being dishonest when he claimed to have won the election, given the fact that votes weren't even, they weren't even done counting the votes yet. And before the votes were counted, Trump already declared that there was election fraud. Now, Meadows also did, of course, help Trump spread the big lie. Meadows has said publicly that he believed a number of allegations still warranted further investigation and that he hadn't reached a conclusion on the election overall by late December of 2020. And on January 2nd, 2021, Meadows helped set up that now infamous phone call between Donald Trump and the Georgia Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger. Now, while speaking with investigators, Meadows was specifically asked if Trump ever acknowledged to him that he had in fact lost the election. Meadows told investigators that no, he had never heard Trump say that. Now, Meadows also told Smith's investigators that around that time, there were many times he wanted to resign over concerns that the way certain allegations of fraud were being handled could have a negative impact, but he ultimately didn't leave because he wanted to help, get a load of this, ensure a peaceful transfer of power, which is why he then proceeded to publish that garbage book where he made garbage, baseless claims, of course, right?
Yeah. So, we halfway jokingly sometimes we'll say hashtag Cenk was right, hashtag Anna was right. In this case, hashtag Cenk and Anna were right. So what were we right about? First, we told you Mark Meadows is probably flipped. You remember us telling you that? Why did we say that? Because he had a conspicuous silence. While everybody's speaking out, I didn't do it, or flipping, etc., you couldn't find Mark Meadows if you knew the codes of the witness protection program, right? Like you just could not find him. He would not say anything. And so that was like a glaring thing. And then when in Atlanta, Fani Willis indicted him, he seemed like shocked and chagrined. Like, what? You can't do that. And that's to us seemed to indicate he's already got to deal with Jack Smith. That's why he's like, what the hell? Why are you indicting me in Atlanta, right?
Right.
And so, but apparently they did a good job of not communicating. And so Fani Willis didn't know that. So now, of course, this will change what happens in Georgia as well. And then the second thing is you could tell from the testimony of everyone else that we found out in the January 6 hearings that Meadows was super nervous about the whole thing. He just felt like, it looks like based on the testimony that he was stuck in the middle. He kept getting yelled at by Trump and he hated being yelled at. And so he was intimidated by that, which made me laugh and laugh. Because that's what is sad. This is one of the tough guys of the Freedom Caucus, right?
Yeah, Chief's chief.
Yeah, Chief's chief, right? And then Trump goes, why didn't you cheat more for me? And he's like, oh, please don't yell at me, right? On the other hand, when the others are saying, like at one of the most important parts, hey, Mark, they're saying that they want to execute the vice president, tell the president. And he's like, I already did, and he doesn't mind.
Yeah, actually, let me get to that. So Meadows does shed light on what Trump was saying behind the scenes as the riots were taking place on January 6th. Sources said Meadows confirmed that at one point, as the riots were unfolding, Trump got on a call with then House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy and told McCarthy, I guess these people are more upset than you are. Meaning like, hey, McCarthy, why aren't you rioting along with these lunatics? However, according to what Meadows told investigators, Trump seemed to grow increasingly concerned as he learned more about what was transpiring at the Capitol, and Trump was visibly shaken when he heard that someone had been shot there. So, of course, he's referring to the woman, the Trump supporter who got shot, the one person who was shot and killed on that day. Tragically, Ashley Babbitt, really tragic that happened to her. She was lied to, and she felt that the election had been stolen from her preferred candidate, a well-known narcissist and liar, and she lost her life as a result of that. I mean, absolutely tragic.
Yeah, so look, guys, now note of caution. So I think I'm justifiably very excited about this news because we want to get to the truth, and we don't want another coup in America, and we want to protect our democracy, and these sons of bitches try to coup, and the fact that they are now turning on each other is the greatest news you could hope for. Now the caveat, what Anna said there in the middle is very important. He apparently did not say that he heard Trump say, "Oh yeah, I know I lost," right? Because if he had that would be huge, because then you have intent to lie, right? Intent to deceive. Now Trump still has the excuse, at least as far as Mark Meadows is concerned, and as far as what we know about his testimony, that like, well, golly gee, every other rational person on the planet knew, but I'm a moron, so I didn't know at all. I thought the mules and the Krakens really had stolen the vote, and Hugo Chavez's ghost was the one that stole the election. I'm the dumbest guy in America. Right. He still has that defense left, and it might work.
Look, it really depends, because think about it in other contexts. So if you are, let's say, speeding, you're going 50 miles an hour in a 35-mile-per-hour zone, the cop pulls you over. It's not a defense to simply say, "Oh, I didn't know that the speed limit here was only 35 miles per hour." It doesn't, you're still gonna get a citation. You're still gonna get a ticket for that. In the case of Donald Trump, for me, what I think is the most important is to see if there's any evidence of Trump himself engaging in plotting that fake elector scheme.
Yeah, totally. And so that's what the trial shows. Okay, so now let me correct a couple of mythologies that the right wing have. Okay, so that first they're like, oh, you shouldn't, like Vivek Ramaswamy was on this show saying you shouldn't even try him. Well, then how do we know if he was involved in the plot or not? Like we have overwhelming public evidence, right? And we know that there was a fake elector scheme, and we know that they wrote emails about it, but Donald Trump doesn't read. I'm not sure he's even capable of reading. And so right now, would I convict him if I was on the jury? Well, I don't know, I didn't see all the evidence, right? I would have to see the evidence from all these. Right now we know that these people flipped, but we don't know the details of all of their testimony. And remember, I'm not going to be on the jury. 12 random people are going to be on the jury, including some that might be Republicans and some that might be independents, and that might be much more open to Trump. You have to convince them, and you have to convince them beyond a reasonable doubt. So I don't want people getting carried away and thinking, "Oh, that city's in an orange jumpsuit, 2 weeks from now." No way, no way. There's a long way to go before that. And remember, even if he gets convicted, he's gonna appeal and appeal and appeal, and it's gonna take a long time. And by that time, he might have already won the election. I'm giving you 1,000 caveats because they're important and they're real, and you have to be honest with your audience and with everybody so you know what the real facts are. But guys, the mythology of the right wing is that you shouldn't even try him because it's deep state to actually go through a justice system. No, the justice system is testing whether you did it or you didn't do it. It's not prejudging it. Judging it is exactly what happens in the justice system, right? So saying that he shouldn't face charges is absurd, given how many co-conspirators have said, yes, we committed a crime together, and he was the leader of that crime. Okay, so then the second thing is they're like, well, you didn't verify the vote, so we think the election was stolen. No, brothers and sisters. I know a lot of Republicans don't know this, and this is gonna go to one of the most important points. A lot of Republicans think that the vote was never verified, that they never did a recount or a hand recount. No, all those states did 2 to 3 recounts, including in Georgia, a hand recount. They could not have recounted an election more than they counted this one and recounted it and verified it, right? And then Trump had 60 cases and he didn't present one piece of evidence, not one piece of evidence. And a lot of Republican voters have, I know it seems unbelievable, but they genuinely don't know that. They think, no, the judges were intimidated, it was procedural, blah, 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 no way, okay? So now you're gonna have a trial where they're gonna get to see this evidence, and it's to some degree. And it's gonna put the Republican voters to a decision. What do you guys wanna do? All of these people who are right-wing Republicans are telling you, he did this. There was never any evidence, we definitely lost the election, and he wanted to do a fake elector plot to steal the election. Okay, and then the Republican voters can say, I don't care. I don't believe anyone. If Jesus Christ himself came down here and told me that Trump was the one trying to steal the election, I wouldn't believe him and I'd spit in his face. Trump is my Messiah. Okay, then you made a decision, right? Or you're gonna say, or by the way, you could say, hey, you know what? I know we were stealing the election, so what? We should rule. I don't care if we won or not. Okay, then at least you made a decision, okay? But there is some chance that a lot of Republicans, and I think a lot of people would be shocked by this, Anna's been saying this all along, I've come to believe it, that a significant chunk of even Republicans, let alone independents, will go, well, I didn't know that. Really? No, I'm not for that. I don't want a coup. That's crazy.
Yeah, and look, it really depends on whether or not the individual in question, looking at the trial and looking at the evidence, is a good faith, honest actor. Because look, I saw what came out during the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, and I changed my mind about it based on evidence that came out in the context of that trial. That is what, in my opinion, honest individuals do. They look at new information, new evidence, and they change their minds. Now the question is, are the news organizations that Republican voters consume going to cover all of these various individuals flipping on Trump? Are they gonna cover the evidence that'll come out during the trial? We'll see. I mean, we've seen them evade that type of news in the past, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do it again.
And look, it's like I said, you got to put every Republican politician to a decision. You also got to put Fox News to a decision. Everyone in news should say, look, if you don't cover this honestly and tell people what's actually happening in the trial, not tell them what to think about what's happening in the trial, but just the facts of the trial, right? Then no one's ever gonna call you Fox News anymore. We're gonna you can call yourself whatever the hell you like, but we're never gonna say news. So the Fox Entertainment Organization or the Fox Propaganda, whatever, they'll never say propaganda, but they could say Fox Entertainment Division has decided to entertain their audience with lies about the trial, but they're certainly not in the news business because they're lying 24. They already paid $800 million for lying. And God, MAGA guys, you think Rupert Murdoch, the guy who's slightly to the right of Attila the Hun, would have paid $800 million if they weren't lying? And one last thing, Trump in all these trials will get to present his evidence. And if he has the Krakens and the mules, and he doesn't bring them forward in the trial, you should be livid at Trump. Well, you had it, right? If you're MAGA, you think it was stolen from you. Great, you should be thrilled about the trials because Trump will get to prove it. If he doesn't, and that still doesn't convince you, then okay, then you're hopeless and you're in a cult. But let's see, let's give them an opportunity. Let's give them an opportunity to see the evidence and change their mind.
All right, we're gonna take a break. When we come back, we'll get to Jenna Ellis, yet another Trump associate who has now flipped on him in the Georgia election interference case.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys, but also Marina Brooke and Dragging My Baggage, get it? They just joined by hitting the join button below. Love you guys. The Young Turks members make this show possible, and we do the show with the members. Speaking of which, Corker47 gifted 5 Young Turks memberships, amazing. But wait till you get a load of this. Benjamin Gilbert Lift gifted 150 Young Turks memberships. Wow, American hero, we appreciate you. Keep it going, guys. That's why God created that join button.
Let's get to the next story, guys. Let's do it.
In the frenetic pace of attempting to raise challenges to the election in several states, including Georgia, I failed to do my due diligence. I believe in and I value election integrity. If I knew then what I know now, I would have declined to represent Donald Trump in these post-election challenges. I look back on this whole experience with deep remorse.
That tearful woman you just heard from was former Trump lawyer Jenna Ellis, who is one of the more recent individuals to turn, flip, if you will, in the case, the Georgia case on election interference. She has decided to take a plea deal in that case, and that means that she will not only plead guilty to what you're about to hear, but also provide testimony in regard to the other co-defendants in the case. That could include people like Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump, of course. So let's hear what she pleaded guilty to in court.
Is it your decision to waive these rights and enter a guilty plea because you are in fact guilty?
It is.
How do you plead to aiding and abetting false statements in writings and under accusation 23 SC 190514.
Guilty.
And is this your signature along with Mr. Hoag's signature on the accusation?
It is.
And is this guilty plea freely and voluntarily given with full knowledge of the charges against you?
It is.
So Ellis has pleaded guilty to making false statements in regard to the 2020 presidential election. Now, in her statement in court, which you saw at the very beginning of this story, she was tearful. What was kind of frustrating to me was how she seemed to want to place the blame on her behavior on everyone else, essentially lying to her. She claimed that, I should have done my due diligence and looked into these allegations that were being made, but I didn't. She knew what she was doing. But it doesn't matter. Look, she has decided to take this plea deal, which means she is going to cooperate with this investigation. So Ellis, who had been facing two charges, including violating Georgia's Anti-Racketeering Act, pleaded guilty in court Tuesday morning to a single felony count of aiding and abetting false statements and writings. The deal allows her to avoid jail time in exchange for providing evidence that could potentially implicate other defendants and agreeing to testify in any future trials. Ellis worked closely with personal Trump lawyer Rudy Giuliani, another defendant in the case who faces 13 charges. So just based on what I've been reading about Ellis and what her role was as a lawyer for the campaign, it seems that she was much closer with Rudy Giuliani, and that could mean that her testimony and cooperation in this case could be more damning for Giuliani than anyone else. But I am curious to see how this plays out, how her flipping is going to impact Donald Trump. Also curious how Donald Trump is going to handle the fact that so many people have flipped on him at this point, including his former chief of staff, Mark Meadows. That story recently broke.
Yeah, so look, if we were dishonest, we would tell you now, Jenna Ellis is the most credible person there is because she's about to give testimony against Donald Trump. So of course we believe everything she's saying now, and so should the jury, right? No, but Jenna Ellis is an obvious liar, right? We're not hiding that fact. Like, she's like, I didn't check and people lied to me. You went on national television in multiple giant press conferences in the middle of one of the most important political events in American history, and you claimed that you were positive that Joe Biden had a nefarious plot to steal this election, and you never checked? Come on. I mean, if that's true, you're the most negligent, ridiculous, pathetic lawyer / person in history, and you should be disbarred. You should like just go into a cave and never come out again for the humiliation that you should suffer for not having even checked one piece of evidence before you went and lied to the country over and over again about how you were positive that Biden had stolen this election and Trump was the rightful leader. Now, of course, I don't believe her. Of course, she checked and she knew she was lying, and she thought, I'm gonna get famous and rich, yes, and then we'll steal the election, and maybe I'll get a great job in the Trump administration. Piece of crap, evil person. The tears can kiss my ass. Those tears are useless. They're, I got caught, I was gonna go to jail. Yeah, that's what I thought. I remember other people crying in court and then coming out later and doing a little jig. Anyways.
So let's talk a little bit about what her role in the Trump campaign was and what she herself carried out. Can I get to those details?
Yes, but I want to explain that, guys, in a second, I'm going to tell you why I think you can trust what she's saying now as opposed to earlier, because there is a real reason. But first, let's give you more details.
Okay, so what was her role? What did she do? This also pours cold water on the notion that she had no idea that these were all just lies. So Ellis worked closely with Giuliani, traveling to battleground states including Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, where prosecutors say she spoke to lawyers urging them to reject the popular vote results in their states. The Georgia indictment also pointed to memos that she wrote for Trump, outlining how Vice President Mike Pence could overturn the election results. So she was part of the effort to reject the election results, implement the fake electors. So that's both good for us in regard to this plea deal, because it means that she could have a lot of tea to spill in this case. Not so great for her in terms of what she's trying to do with changing the public's perception of who she is and what she engaged in, because she was very much involved. She didn't just go around like Mark Meadows did, lying vocally about the results of the 2020 election. She took part in writing those memos. She helped to put those wheels in motion in regard to the fake electors based on what we're seeing in the indictment. So she has now pleaded guilty. I also want to remind you all that previously, she had turned against Trump, not in this case, but publicly on social media because the legal bills were starting to stack up. And Trump had no interest in helping any of the co-defendants when it came to those legal bills. And I remember saying at the time when that story broke, this is going to bite Trump in the ass. Because what incentive do these individuals have to not flip on him? You know, look, there's a good chance that he might be found guilty and he might not even get sentenced to any prison time. Them though, okay, the Jenna Ellises of the world, they'll get sentenced to prison.
Yeah, they certainly would have if they hadn't flipped, and that's going to go to my point. But I just want to double down on what Anna said. Trump, world's dumbest man. How do you not give money to your co-defendants, you schmuck? Of course they're going to flip on you if they have no money to defend themselves, etc. And besides which, you know you did it, and you know they did it. That's when you help them the most. You don't go, well, I hope they take 20 years to life for me. God, he's so pathetic and dumb. Okay, anyways.
So let me just let them know what she's agreed to do, because that's also relevant for the commentary you're gonna give. So according to the details of this plea agreement, Ellis agreed to complete 3 to 5 years probation and 100 hours of community service and pay $5,000 in restitution to the Georgia State Secretary of State. She also agreed to write a letter of apology to the state of Georgia, something that every single one of these individuals who took a plea deal agreed to do. So that is the extent of the punishment that she will face as a result of her agreeing to this plea deal. So Cenk, go ahead.
So first of all, that shows you 2 things. One, you get probation of 3 to 5 years. That means that, I was doing hyperbole with 20 years to life. You're not gonna get life for this. But by the way, coup against America, I think you should get life. But anyways, realistically, that means she would have gotten a very heavy sentence if she had not cooperated, okay? But the second thing that it tells you is, since she's not actually getting jail time, she's getting probation, etc. That means she gave pretty good evidence. And so you don't take that deal unless you got good evidence. So now that's another giant mark against Donald Trump, and he's reeling. Okay, now, why should you believe her today as opposed to earlier? Well, if she was telling the truth earlier and this election was stolen by Biden and Hugo Chavez and a Kraken, why wouldn't she just stick with that? Why would she admit to a crime she didn't do? Well, then she has to cry and beg, and her career is ruined, and she has to admit she did it, and she gets 3 to 5 years probation, and she gets all this, and it goes on her criminal record. You would never admit that if A, you didn't do it, and B, you had Donald Trump behind you, who at this point is now favored to win the election. You'd be nuts to agree to something you didn't do under that circumstance, especially with all of the political power behind you. The only reason you would admit it at this point is they had you dead to rights. They had all the evidence that you were lying and you were gonna go to jail for a long time. And so then you realized, all right, the jig is up. Yes, you got me. I was lying before, and now I'm telling the truth because I don't want to go to jail. And you had overwhelming evidence, and I was going to go to jail. That's why she's now telling the truth.
All right, after the break, we'll get to the latest updates on Israel's war in Gaza. Come right back.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, Brian Eakins, Mystics 108, and Samuel Leba. Thank you. They just became members by hitting the join button below. We appreciate you, Casper.
All right, let's get to our next story.
We have here 2 forces. One is an axis of evil.
States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil.
This is a part of an axis of evil of Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas.
The more things change, the more they stay the same. Here you have the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, referring to Hamas, Hezbollah as the axis of evil to justify the ongoing war in Gaza, which has already killed far more civilians than Hamas fighters, far more people than were killed by Hamas terrorists in Israel. But there is no ceasefire in sight. Israel refuses to engage in a ceasefire, and the United States has its back on that. But for the purposes for this discussion, I think it's really important to talk about how we're repeating mistakes, massive mistakes, while simultaneously claiming that we acknowledged the disastrous preemptive war that the United States launched against Iraq back in 2003. Now Israel is considering a preemptive war in Lebanon against Hezbollah. And all of this is happening while Biden claims that he asked Netanyahu and the rest of the Israeli government to avoid repeating the same mistakes the United States made following the terrorist attacks on September 11th. Now, here was the moment when America heard former President George W. Bush in January of 2002 use that word, coin that phrase, axis of evil. Let's watch.
North Korea is a regime arming with missiles and weapons of mass destruction while starving its citizens. Iran aggressively pursues these weapons and exports terror, while an unelected few repress the Iranian people's hope for freedom. Iraq continues to flaunt its hostility toward America and to support terror. The Iraqi regime has plotted to develop anthrax and nerve gas and nuclear weapons for over a decade. This is a regime that has already used poison gas to murder thousands of its own citizens, leaving the bodies of mothers huddled over their dead children. This is a regime that agreed to international inspections, then kicked out the inspectors. This is a regime that has something to hide from the civilized world. States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world. By seeking weapons of mass destruction, these regimes pose a grave and growing danger.
Now, the person who wrote axis of evil in George W. Bush's speech is David Frum, a never Trump Republican who likes to cozy up with the Democratic Party these days, considering the MAGA era of the Republican Party, which I'm definitely not happy about. And I think you can see the influence among Democrats who have been cheerleading what Israel is currently doing in the Gaza Strip, knowing full well that the majority of the victims there happen to be Palestinian civilians, the majority of whom actually happen to be children, by the way. Half of the country is under the age of 18 in Palestine, in Gaza. Now, at the time of Bush's speech, the axis of evil consisted of North Korea, Iran, and Iraq, which of course we did a preemptive war in the following year. Now there's a new axis of evil, according to Netanyahu and his allies, Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas. Now, as you all know, I have no love for Hamas. We have been incredibly critical of these terrorist groups, incredibly critical of what Hamas did to innocent Israeli civilians. But taking that tragedy and compounding it and hurting and killing innocent civilians, not the right answer if you ask me. So here's a little more from Netanyahu, using the same terminology that we heard from Bush back in 2002. And then Cenk, I want to hear your thoughts.
Just as the world united to defeat the Nazis, just as the world united to defeat ISIS, the world has to stand united behind Israel to defeat Hamas. This is a part of an axis of evil of Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas. Their goal, open goal, is to eradicate the state of Israel. The open goal of Hamas is to kill as many Jews as they could, and the only difference is they would have killed every last one of us, murdered every last one of us, if they could. This is not merely our battle, it's the battle of the entire civilized world. It's the battle of Israel, it's the battle of the moderate Arab countries, it's the battle of Western civilization, the battle of the free world, the battle for the future. We have here two forces. One is an axis of evil led by Iran through Hezbollah, Hamas, and others that want to bring back the Middle East to the Middle Ages.
So I am curious what you think about Cenk, because I remember the Bush era clearly. Obviously, no one in the United States was minimizing the severity and the tragedy of 9/11. But in the beginning, there was a small group of vocal individuals, you were one of them, who were incredibly critical of the notion of engaging in a preemptive war in Iraq. But you got shouted down. I remember a lot of the anti-war individuals who were calling for peace got shouted down. They didn't support the troops, they alleged. They don't believe in national security. They don't see these evil terrorists as the imminent threat as they are. And that's how they rallied support. That is how the media manufactured consent for that preemptive war, which ended up being a complete and utter disaster. Now, the situation's a little different with Israel, okay? But at the same time, the idea that Israel should be allowed to respond by just leveling entire neighborhoods and killing innocent Palestinian civilians is insane to me. And the idea that we should just brush off those war crimes as if it's no big deal, no, I don't accept it, sorry.
Yeah, okay, so first of all, anytime people start talking about the axis of evil, what they're saying is we would like to start a war.
Exactly.
And we'd like, and in this case, Netanyahu, Hamas started this particular attack, no question about it. But what Netanyahu is saying is, I would like to make the war much broader. And he's arguing for a preemptive strike in Lebanon.
Yes.
And that is, of course, a war crime. That's a war of aggression. That's an offensive war. That is a war that Israel would start. And if they did that, they should have zero allies in the world in that offensive imperialistic war against Lebanon. What is he trying to do? Conquer the entire Middle East? This lunatic? Okay, there is one person that's evil here. That is indisputable. I mean, there's plenty of people that are evil. Hamas is evil, etc. But Netanyahu is definitely among them. So the guy who's constantly war, violence, death, destruction, killing, is subjugation, oppression of Palestinians. Now that guy right there, Netanyahu, core evil. There aren't that many people in my lifetime that were the leaders of legitimate governments, not terrorist groups, but legitimate governments that have been as evil as Netanyahu. So the constant oppression and crushing of the Palestinians, the nonstop killing of civilians, obviously on purpose. If you're not blinded by bias, you know that Netanyahu is killing them on purpose. Oh, golly gee, did I hit a residential building again? Maybe there was a terrorist, maybe at the bottom of a tunnel at the bottom of the building. Yeah, oh, did I kill thousands of innocent Palestinians again? I guess they were collateral damage, wink, without a single effort to actually get a single hostage, okay? So my answer to this war is hell no. No way we shouldn't spend, look guys, at this point, Netanyahu has burned all the goodwill of Israel. What an awful, despicable leader. So the people of Israel had the whole world's sympathy. They had all the goodwill for the first time in a long time, because yes, 56 years of occupation is brutal. The world did not hate you because of general anti-Semitism. General anti-Semitism exists. That doesn't mean that's why the whole world condemned the occupation. They condemned the occupation because the occupation is immoral and it is wrong, and it has been wrong for over 50 years.
Can I just say, Cenk, I watched your interview on Dan Abrams' show, okay? And he said something at the tail end before wrapping it up real quick about how like, oh, it's not fair. People expect higher standards from Israel. Israel is treated differently from other countries. Now, let me be clear, okay? Any country, including the United States, that engages in war crimes should be found guilty of engaging war crimes, and the individuals who have carried that out should be brought to justice. Now, unfortunately, here in the United States, we ended up electing Barack Obama, who refused to pursue war crime charges against the Bush administration. I totally think he should have. But in the case of Israel, no, if Israel's carrying out war crimes, if they do a preemptive war on top of all the civilians they're killing in the Gaza Strip, yeah, hell yeah, do they want special treatment? Are we supposed to just be scared that the Israeli government is gonna accuse us of anti-Semitism and we're supposed to just shut up and pretend like our eyes don't see what's currently transpiring right now?
I'm going to say this one more time. I'll probably have to say it 12 more times. Just because there's global anti-Semitism doesn't mean, well, that's the only reason why the Palestinians don't like us. I mean, the fact that we put our boot on their neck for the last 56 years, that has nothing to do with it. It's just that they're the evil, hateful ones.
How many videos have we seen this week alone of a single Palestinian crying, weeping because their entire family was wiped out? Put yourself in that person's shoes. Imagine one strike, one airstrike, your entire family gone, everyone in your family gone. How would you feel about that?
And guys, there's something like the supporters of Netanyahu's government here in America, including in American media, make it sound like poor Israel's being picked on. And you're only seeing the negative things about it. Total opposite of reality. So Israel did this propaganda thing, and by the way, this part of it, even though it's propaganda, I totally agree with. They showed people, reporters, 45-minute reel of all the atrocities that Hamas did. From what I can see, I call it propaganda because they're trying to get their message out, and I said the same about the Ukrainians, who I totally back, okay? But they're trying to get their message out that Hamas was brutal and atrocious, and that is true.
It is true,
and
yes.
And I don't mind them doing that. So then American media then went and wall to wall, Jake Tapper, everyone else, oh my God, we saw this video, it's the worst thing in the world. Good. Report that, no problem. But there's no equal and opposite video of Palestinians being crushed in the rubble. We could give you a 45-hour video of one Palestinian after another. And what I know that you guys don't know is, in the international world, and a lot of you are international and you see it. But for example, in Turkey, they're now showing the actual videos of Gaza where the parents are picking up body parts. And it's actual verified videos. So we can show you 45 hours if we had the ability to send in journalists. Israel has already killed 23 journalists in the area. So if journalists could go in and get more of those videos, there would be endless videos of children's body parts that Netanyahu created and pretended he was fighting Hamas. And then the impossible standard. The Palestinians have to say they reject Hamas, otherwise we won't stop bombing them. Well, how could the Palestinians tell you that? How? There's no elections, there's no democracy, there's no reporters, there's no nothing. How do you become convinced that the Palestinians have rejected Hamas? It is an impossible standard on purpose so that you could kill more, so you could crush more. No, I'm 100% against this. They're trying to drive us into World War III. They're trying to drive us into a war with Iran, these goddamn monsters. And I want no part of it. I want no part of it. I would send $0 to Israel. Forget the new aid. I would withdraw all of the aid if they do a preemptive attack inside another country. I do not want a broader war. America does not want a broader war. I don't care how many people in power pretend we want a broader war and have our kids die in Iran. We do not want that.
That is what they are gearing up for in rhetoric, possibly even in military buildup. There's certainly quite a bit of military buildup among IDF soldiers with the Israeli-Lebanon border. And I want to give you some more details about what they're thinking or where their heads are at. And that is why we're kind of panicking about this, because this could very easily turn into a broader war with the United States cheerleading Israel all throughout. Let's go to graphic 4 here. Israel continued to strike Hezbollah targets inside Lebanon. They're already doing strikes in Lebanon. Rear Admiral Daniel Hagari, an IDF spokesman, said Monday, Netanyahu has warned Hezbollah that Israel would retaliate if the militant group joined the war, and that any escalation along the shared border would be devastating for Lebanon. Israeli media has been abuzz with reports of internal Israeli government deliberations over a second front with Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, with the defense minister and other Israeli officials reportedly advocating a preemptive strike on the militant group, and the US cautioning against it. Now, the US is allegedly cautioning against it. But the second Israel really applies pressure to the United States government to back them in this, they will. And if you don't believe me, I want to actually go to that last video, the John Kirby video. You have National Security Advisor John Kirby. Listen to what he said during a press conference today when he was asked whether there should be a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. This tells you where US officials are on this issue.
We're going to continue to make sure Israel has the tools and the capabilities that they need to defend themselves. We're going to continue to try to get that humanitarian assistance in. We're going to continue to try to get hostages and people out of Gaza appropriately. And as I think you've heard us say, a ceasefire right now really only benefits Hamas.
Yeah. I would venture to say the ceasefire overwhelmingly would benefit innocent Palestinian civilians, the majority of whom make up the current death toll that we keep sharing with you all, that has now surpassed 5,000 people.
Okay, yeah, these guys are warmongers. And this, when I say these guys, it includes the United States of America. So we were warmongers in Iraq, and we did war crimes in Iraq, and I called it out when we did it. If we had the courage to call ourselves out, we should have the courage to call out our allies. And we call out other allies all the time. The minute Turkey oversteps their bounds, we call them out instantly, right? But when it comes to Israel, that's the one ally we can never ever call out. It's bizarre, it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous, but it's not, guys, you have to understand, this isn't about Israel. There's a lot of power and money on the line here. So Netanyahu cares about keeping his power, and he thinks the more war, death, and destruction, the more Israelis will vote for him. Israeli citizens should prove him wrong. Okay.
So far they are. So far he's tremendously unpopular, and the tactic that George W. Bush used in order to garner support among the American people is not working with Netanyahu as it stands right now. It could change.
And I know that Israel is in a rage, and I get it. You were wounded deeply. I understand that, right? And we were in a rage after 9/11, and everybody gets in a rage when their family and their friends and their loved ones get attacked. But if you want to help Israel, you have to tell. If you know any Israelis, if you know anyone, you have to tell them, please don't do this. Like, you're not getting the full picture. The rest of the world thinks us, America and Israel, are monsters for what they're doing. One of the body parts was an ear. What are we doing? What are we doing? And saying, hey, we're only 3 times as brutal as Hamas is not a winning argument. That is a despicable, awful argument. 3 times as many Palestinian civilians killed. If you say it doesn't matter, you're a monster. Just be clear. All right, now, why am I telling you this isn't even about Israel? Because get a load of what Mitch McConnell said. He's gonna use the same phrase, but he's gonna have a different cast of characters, because it isn't about the other guys. It's about the need to start a war so that they can remain in power, and the defense contractors here in America could make billions and maybe trillions of dollars. Watch.
States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world.
And just as the world united to defeat the Nazis, just as the world united to defeat ISIS, the world has to stand united behind Israel to defeat Hamas. This is a part of an axis of evil.
There's an axis of evil in the world. China, Russia, North Korea.
Of Iran and Hezbollah and Hamas. Their goal, open goal, is to eradicate the state of Israel. The open goal of Hamas is to kill as many Jews as they could, and the only difference is they would have killed every last one of us, murdered every last one of us, if they could.
Yeah, you would have killed every last one of them if you could, and in fact, you're in the middle of doing it right now. So, but the more important part of that clip is, and I love that we showed all 3 to you guys. You see, it doesn't matter, just fill in the blank. Hamas, China,
Russia,
Hezbollah, Russia, North Korea. It doesn't matter. They just want war. They don't even particularly care who the war is against. Do not let these warmongers win. I do not want Israel's moral high ground to be evaporated, which is it's in the middle of doing now, and I don't want the American moral high ground, for whatever is left of it, to be eviscerated by these monsters who go around saying we should start preemptive wars, and wars that will be gigantic in the Middle East and will unleash death and destruction like we haven't seen in a long, long time. My answer is hell no, no, ceasefire right now.
All right, that does it for the first hour. When we come back, we've got some more information on one of the hostages that was released by Hamas yesterday. She talked about her experience while she was a hostage. It's important to get to the details on that and more when we come back.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk, and I'll see you soon.